Thank you so much, Edward, Karen, and Sis Nobisa. I just want to allow Lucien or Tatu MP just an opportunity, just about not more than 5 minutes, because I'd like the bulk of it to be, bulk of our time to be given to us having the engagement. So just to speak into the conversation. We'll start with Lucien.
Is this thing working? Yeah. Thanks very much for raising the issue around workerism. I just wanted to maybe start with a short story and then I'll get into what the chapter about workerism was about. So it's been quite an interesting weekend. We had a situation where the president was booed at a FOSATU Congress, at a FOSATU May Day. It's the first time ever. Yet many of those who were booing him were supporting another guy who would also have cause, I think, for a lot of workers to be worried about, which is Cyril Ramaphosa. We have a situation where in August 2012, there was a massacre at One Mill Mine, in which Cyril Ramaphosa owned shares. Now we have a situation where the labour movement is split in a choice between Jacob Zuma and Cyril Ramaphosa. Now this is exactly the situation that the workerist current wanted to avoid. The workerist current in the early 1980s, at a time where we tend to forget the African National Congress, the South African Communist Party were not the big dominant forces they were now. The workerist current, based in a large section of independent black unions, argued that the working class needed to go it alone, that the working class needed to fight for an emancipation and a liberation that was much deeper than simply electoral democracy, that the working class, organizing itself first through trade unions, then through a larger working class movement, should aim at a radical and massive redistribution of power and of wealth in society. What the workers argued was that a genuine emancipation for the majority of people, for the black working class in particular, but the larger working class in South Africa, required autonomous, independent, powerful shop floor-based unions that would be able to win at the point of production immediate gains, but that would then be able to project their power and their assistance to other sections of the working class. So from the factory to the township, to systematically build at the grassroots powerful, democratic, bottom-up, worker-controlled movements. And in this, rather than form an alliance between the working class and capitalists, rather than form an alliance between the working class and landed landowners, rather than form an alliance between the working class and political parties, the aim should rather be to unite the working class, the employed and the unemployed, unionized and the community-based, the youth and those who are working, their parents. And the aim here in trying to get this capacity was to build working class identity, working class culture, working class history, to fight for significant economic and political reforms, including within working class communities, but as a step, as a basis, as a method to accumulate the power and resources that the working class could use to push for further gains, not as the junior partner of a political party, but as an autonomous force, not in a popular front, which is an alliance between different classes, but in a workers' front. This required, they argued, a movement separate from the nationalists, including the African National Congress, separate from the Marxist-Leninists, including the South African Communist Party, separate from the multi-class nationalist movements that they promoted. Their general argument was that after independence, the typical pattern is that the working class hoists new governments into power and then is hoisted by those new governments. Their argument was, they sent a study to Zimbabwe in 1983, that the working class makes the sacrifices. The working class can't go into exile. The working class stays and it fights and it struggles and it builds patiently. But others come and they take what the working class has built. And in 1983 in Zimbabwe, this is what happened. There was a massive strike wave by workers. The government at the time cracked down on it. Robert Mugabe put the unions under the direct control of the state and appointed his nephew, Albert Mugabe, as head of unions. And unions paid their fees to the government, not to the unions. This is what they were looking at, and that's what they were worried about. The other key part of this, the stress on working class power, working class independence, and the expansion of workers' power across society in order to secure a radical, major redistribution of wealth in limited resources, was a very key point. And this was the point that the full emancipation of the working class majority in South Africa, including and specifically the black working class majority in South Africa, required the abolition of capitalism. That while workers continue to be exploited and dispossessed, they would have freedom perhaps in the form of formal rights, in the form of an independent government, but they would not have real equality. Moses Mayakiso, who was a leading workerist in Mawu, he was elected first president of NUMSA while in jail on treason charges, argued, apartheid is just an appendage. It's a branch of something else, the tree of oppression, which is capitalism. If you chop the branch, the tree can still grow. You have to chop the stem straight once and for all. South Africa's economy is in an advanced stage, and the workers can take over and direct the whole thing. There are not two stages in the revolution. There's one stage, continuous. In other words, the achievement of workers' freedom from apartheid had to be and required the simultaneous destruction, pushing back the relations of capitalism. Now, to start to pull this together, the aim was to build a broad working class movement for working class power. In this sense, majority rule meant the rule of the working class. In this sense, the aim was not to create a new nation with different, which reproduced the exploitation dispossession of the past, but a new nation reconstituted by the working class. A new nation free of racism and the material divisions and the capitalist system that underpins it. A non-racial nation, but based on class unity. And within this process, to build, through immediate struggles and structures, elements of the future. That is to build tomorrow today. That is to use the immediate struggles to build the capacities for a new future, to build the democratic capacities for a new future. Now, just to pull this together and tie it back to what Eddie said, why would you want to create a nation? Well, one of the main arguments was you wanted to unite the working class. You wanted to unite it over the divisions that had been instituted under apartheid between rural and urban Africans, between colours and Africans, between Indians and Africans, between white workers and Africans. Now, obviously the core of this movement was a black movement, but it was one which envisaged its allies in working class terms and one which envisaged its project as one of the working class revolution. Secondly, how does this link to capitalism? Rather than go with the idea you can de-racialize capitalism, their argument was you could only de-racialize South Africa by abolishing capitalism. So, to close that there, I'm done. To close that there, the aim was to avoid exactly what we have now. The aim was to have a working class movement independent of the political parties, able to forge its own way, able to make consistent gains for working and poor people, able to push back the boundary of power and of wealth in society, and able to constitute itself as a power, a class preparing for power that would be able to secure its final emancipation. Thanks.
All right, thank you so much, Lucien.
I just want to thank everybody for the important points they've raised, people on the panel, the discussants, people who've attended this. I think it's very, very valuable, and this is exactly why rediscovering these hidden voices is important, because these are discussions and traditions that people have dealt with as well. We don't have to reinvent the wheel, I think, sometimes. I think we need to appreciate and engage with the powerful intellectual traditions of the working class and the left. And I think this is partly why I think this Hidden Voices project is so valuable. And that past is also still with us in other ways. If we want to look for an echo of workerism, we can see it with the new developments in the labour movement, the so-called NUMSA moment, the launch of the new federation, and NUMSA as a union positioning itself around slogans like fees must fall, like land expropriation without compensation. What links these two things together is the understanding, and it goes to one of the points that was raised over there, that the issue is a system. The issue isn't a particular party, it's not a particular individual, it's a system. And that system is something that has to be tackled. What the workers understood is the system that we're dealing with is capitalism, which was implanted here in a particular form through an imperial project. A capitalist society is built on the exploitation of the working class. This is not an accidental feature. It's not a feature that can be removed. The exploitation of the working class is capitalism. That is the point of capitalism. That is the core of capitalism. Therefore, what is the negation of a system based on the exploitation? That is for the working class itself to organize its power, its ability, its capacities, its identity, to recognize and appropriate its history, to build its capacity systematically and patiently, that it is able to shake that edifice of power, that it is able to shake that class that rules. Understanding that a past that was lost tragically through war and conflict can never be recovered. But what is possible is to reconstitute the mass of the nation, that is the working class, to create a future that is better than what we have now. To create a civilized society, because we're not there. South Africa is a wretched morass of racial tension, class conflict, misery, and miseration on all sides. How do we get out of it? That's really the question. And I'll just leave with a few points from the workers' movement. What they stressed was the importance of building movements based amongst the most exploited and oppressed strata. Movements that systematically built democratic structures that were able to force, win, hold, consolidate gains as a basis for future and further advance. A movement that understood the importance of strategically building bases of power, and then, once those are built, to move on from there. Not to deal in populism, not to deal in promises, but to deal in practice, a practice that is democratic and empowering. The other question that I want to disclose on here is, for them the issue is, of course, you would need to redistribute wealth and power, but the question is to whom? In that quote from Moses Mayakiso that I gave, he said, well, to say we give land and wealth to the people, the question is, who is the people? Ramaphosa is part of the people. And back in the day when Tanzima was part of the people have to be clearly defined. And their argument was, the majority of people is the working class. Therefore, the redistribution of wealth and power must go to the working class, not through an external agency, the state, not through a deferred power, that is elections, not through writing letters on Facebook, but through the conscious construction of a working class power, through organizing, through trade unions in particular, but not exclusively. Their point was that worker control and democracy, built in the here and now, lays the basis for a future based on worker control and democracy. That the immediate fights that we have now can form the basis of the bridgehead for a much more radical transformation of society. So a transformation isn't something that we simply declare in a manifesto. Society has to be built, organized for, conscientized for. Something that cannot be destroyed with a few leaders being removed. A system in which everyone is a leader, in which everyone is truly socially and economically equal. Thank you.